Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for being here. Okay. Think. Hey, Brooke, happy Friday. Awesome. I'll just try to keep this here in case anyone else comes. Cool. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Liana. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm the peer advisor for the Women's Collective here at the Women's and Gender Equity Center. I'll go ahead and let our student facilitators introduce themselves. Lisa, do you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a sociology major and also a fourth year at CSULB. So this is actually my last semester, which is really bittersweet, but I'm really happy to be here in this space with everyone.
And hi everyone, my name is Fatima Zafarino and I am a Chicano Latino Studies major with a minor in political science and sociology. This is my second year at CSULB and I'm super thankful. I was sharing before, but I'm super thankful for a lot of the leadership positions that I've been able to be a part of. And I've worked closely along a lot of different centers that include the Women's and Gender Equity Center. I forgot to mention in the beginning, I'm a student. I am a part of the council for the women's women's collective, sorry. Pretty nervous, but everything's gonna go well. So I'm just very excited to be a part of all these different opportunities. I've grown in so many ways, professional and personal. So, and I'm very excited to see what is in store for in the future. But thank you so much, and I will pass it back on to Lilian.
Awesome, yay. Okay, so I'll go ahead and just give some reminders. As you all see, the event will be recorded, and this is just for folks who aren't able to make it. It'll be posted on our WGEC YouTube. We do encourage y'all to keep your cameras on, so our panelists can see your wonderful faces to kind of keep us engaged. We will have a Q&A at the end, but if you feel the need to comment or your reactions, use those emojis. That's also encouraged, again, to kind of engage with the panelists. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started with some acknowledgements, the land acknowledgements. We acknowledge the Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and Southern Channel Islands, and are grateful to have the opportunity to work at the sacred site of Pavagna. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives, relations past, present, and emerging. Also, with our labor acknowledgements, we recognize and acknowledge the labor upon which our country, state, and institution are built. We remember that our country was built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the US from the African continent, and recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We also acknowledge all immigrant and indigenous labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented peoples who contributed to the building of the country and continue to serve within our labor force. We recognize that our country is continuously defined, supported, and built upon by oppressed communities and peoples. We acknowledge labor inequities and the shared responsibility for combating oppressive systems in our daily work. So for those that aren't familiar with us, at the Women's and Gender Equity Center, their mission is really to, it focuses on fostering an understanding of gender, and because that's always changing and evolving, in academia and society. So it's the responsibility of the WGEC to promote gender equity affairs among individuals of diverse gender identities and expressions through intentional and educational approaches rooted in social justice principles. And one of the programs under WGEC is the Women's Collective. As we've mentioned, it is student-led. The mission we have is to build community among women students of color at Cal State Long Beach. And one of the programs we have each semester is the Rising Speaker Series, where we invite professionals to present, or in this case, hold conversations on critical issues in our community to build awareness and even explore identities. So with that, I'd like to introduce this year's student, the Women's Collective Council. So we have Lisa, who is here facilitating with us, Angelica, Kenya, Vanessa, who is also here with us, and Fatima, who is also facilitating with Lisa today. They are, all from different classes and majors. We even have one student that's a graduate student. So, these are the peers and these are the women behind the hard work of the events that we're holding this academic year. And I'll go ahead now and pass it off to Fatima, who will introduce our panelists.
Hello, everyone. So I encourage everyone now to, you're welcome to display any reactions while I give an intro of our panelists today. So please give a warm welcome to our amazing panelists. To begin, we will start with Lorena Romero. So she is a counselor with the Educational Opportunity Program EOP and the current co-chair of the Latinx Faculty and Staff Association at Cal State Long Beach. She was born and raised by her grandmother in the city of Santa Ana, which I am also from. Lorena also received a BA in Human Services at CSU Fullerton and a Master's in Public Policy and Administration at CSULB. As a former EOP student, she understands the struggle of navigating college and the impact retention programs such as EOP have on first-generation and low-income students. Her passion is in higher education, and working with students is what drives her in her career as an educator. So everybody, please give warm welcome, share any reactions on there. Please, thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, round of applause. Thank you, Lisa. And now to introduce our next panelist, Dr. Shelley Collins. Dr. Shelley is a licensed psychologist who specializes in relationships, racial, gender, and sexual minority mental health, increasing cultural competence, and fostering a sense of belonging. In addition to her clinical work as a staff psychologist at California State University and in private practice at the Black Girl Doctor, she is also a part-time professor for the City College of San Francisco. Dr. Shelley is a change maker committed to promoting equity and inclusion and is the current co-chair of the CSULB Division of Student Affairs Equity and Inclusion Task Force, the current president of the Black Faculty and Staff Association, a 2021 and 2022 recipient of the NASPA Silver Award in Excellence, and published in the area of microaggressions among highly educated people of color. She is an experienced speaker who presents for corporate and academic audiences on topics such as inclusion, relational health and wellness, managing stress and anxiety, racial trauma from radical resilience, and multicultural competence. And now I will pass it on to Lisa to introduce our final panelists. Again, y'all are encouraged to use those emojis. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. Okay, so Dr. Barbara Kim is a professor, chair, and advisor for graduate and undergraduate students in the Department of Asian American Studies. She is a 1.5 generation Korean American and a daughter of immigrant parents. Her current research work and teaching centers on Asian American identity and community formations with special attention to intersections of family, aging, gender, and immigration. She's also the co-author of the book Carrying Across Generations, The Linked Lives of Korean American Families, and currently working with professor in the Department of Sociology to examine the formation of pan-ethnic Asian American communities through a case study in Cerritos, California. Finally, she's the principal investigator of Project Resilience at CSULB, which was awarded significant funding from the U.S. Department of Education in 2021. She is thrilled to be part of CSULB team of campus and community partners that offer mental health, academic, and career development support for students to transform communities experiencing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so these are our amazing panelists today. Now I want to give a brief breakdown of the event. So first, we will start with reading questions to our panelists, and each person will share their response, but in no particular order. Cameras are encouraged to stay on, but mics muted for this portion. And there will be time at the end for a Q&A. So if you have any comments, reactions, or questions, please feel free to share them in the chat. Okay, so now I'll pass it on to Fatima, who will start with asking questions to our panelists.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, so to get started, as women of color, we hold various roles and identities. The majority of the time, this can be a lot to take on, especially in leadership positions. As women of color leaders yourselves, I would like to highlight your experiences and perspectives to promote hope for future generations of women of color students here on our campus community. To start off, I'd like to ask, what does promoting hope mean to you as women of color in today's current climate? And again, in no particular order, anybody can go ahead and start.
Okay, so I will just jump in. I wasn't sure. Wait, Lorena, you unmuted. Go. Okay, Lorena, I will go on and I will popcorn it over to you. That's kind of a multi-layered word, right? So when I look at hope for myself, I'm thinking about being able to be ambitious, recognize my goals, be successful, not only in my professional life, but also in my personal life. It is about self-efficacy too, like this ability that I have inside me to know that I can actually do something about it. And I think that hope to some extent is connected to control, because in times when my control has been taken away, I have also felt hopeless or helpless. And I also understand that even though there's a lot of things that maybe we can't control that happens to us, there are a lot of things that are in our control that we can do something about. And so I focus on that. I focus on what are the things that I can do something about? How can I use my voice to not only help myself, but advocate for others? Because at the end of the day, whatever is happening or whatever I feel is unfair or not working for me means that there's somebody else that may also be feeling the same, or this can also be helping somebody else. And so I use my voice to tell stories, to ask opinions, to get validation. I mean, a lot of times people will say, you know what, let's just kind of figure out or assume that we know what you're saying. No, you don't have to worry. You don't have to assume. I will tell you what I need. I will tell you what it is that that I want. And I think that there is a strength and a hopefulness in being able to do that, because now you don't even have to figure it out, because I'm just actually telling. And so hope to me means that you are able to do that for yourselves, right? You're able to ask for what you want. You're able to demand what it is that you need. Sending it over to you, Lorena.
Thank you, Shelley. Well, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything that Shelley is. Just by the definition of hope is, having it's the power, of believing that anything is possible and that you're able to accomplish anything that you set your mind to. And with that also comes the responsibility for people that, hold positions where, I've gone to school, I got in my degree, and now it's passing that forward, right? Uplifting those that need to be uplifting. And like Shelley said, using your voice. Your voice is powerful, and I think that a lot of times we fall into a circle of just holding things in and not realizing that speaking out and voicing our opinions and our wants and our needs is important. And not just for ourselves, but also doing it for those that might not have that voice or might not, or are in that process of learning what their voice is. So for me, it's all about, uplifting those that need it by listening, by being there, by, showing people that, you know, they're not alone, right? That there's a lot of people out there that go through the same things that you go through, and that, you know, you're gonna have ups and downs in life. And it's just a matter of, you know, keep pushing forward, knowing that there's always going to be someone there to lend you a hand, to lend you a shoulder, to, you know, listen to you. So that to me is what I define as hope.
Thank you, Shelley and Lorena. I could not agree more. When I received the list of questions that the collective members sent, and thank you so much for all your work in coordinating this event, and everyone also for being here. It was interesting to me that this was the first question, because I think it was in some ways the most profound, and also the hardest in some ways, just because of everything that's going on. I think personally, just in our communities, globally. So it took me a little bit back, because I think some ways we rely on hope to get us through. And I feel like every day things happen, they're like, yeah, it couldn't possibly get worse than this. And then the next day you're like, wow, it actually did become worse. And I don't even know how that is possible. But having said that, I think we show up every day because of exactly of what my panelists have said. I think we show up because we believe in the collective, we believe in the community, and the folks around us make us stronger. And I would say one of the things I've actually really been thinking about with these questions is, I think the one thing I've learned over my lifetime is so far is that leadership comes in so many different forms. And there are some of you here who have always stepped up, who's always been the person stepping up, and always the person sort of taking action, or chosen to take the action, or voluntold to do that. And I think there are those of us who don't necessarily see ourselves as leaders, and yet, again, are sort of asked to step up in those crucial moments, and you do, and you show up again for folks. And I, in my intro, I said that, it was really important to me that you all know that I'm a child and daughter of immigrants, because I think that is something that has really shaped me all my life. It has affected like what I'm going to study, what I did in college, what I did in grad school, what I'm doing now, and also how I relate to people, I think, and also my form of leadership. So I think understanding who you are and how your form of leadership and being involved may look not the same, but understand that the way in which show up for others and for yourself is so crucial, because other people truly benefit from that and really derive so much strength and hope from that. So, I think that this space is just an example of that. So yes, that's how I find hope.
Wow, I love all of your responses. They're so in-depth. They have to do a lot of like your identities and who you are as a person. So now I just want to ask this, how have your varying roles and identities impacted you? How have your varying roles and identities impacted you?
I think it shapes you. I think we as women have so many different roles and so many different identities. For myself, I'm a daughter, right? I'm a daughter of my grandmother. My grandmother raised me. She was never identified to me as my grandmother. She was always my mother. And that shaped me to be the person that I am now. The resiliency that I have is because of her. And I'm sorry, I get emotional every time I talk about her. She passed away a couple of years ago. But she's the one that, took me in and showed me how to be strong. And she wasn't able to give me a lot. We grew up poor. She didn't know a lot about education and how to guide me through, higher education, but she was always there to support me and to lend me a word of wisdom and being positive. She was rough. She was hard. She was a very strict, old-fashioned grandmother, you know. So she would always ask me stuff. How are you doing? You know, and she knew that she couldn't, you know, she didn't know how to help me, but just by her being there and guiding me and giving me her support, I knew that she was doing the best that she could do, and that's what I needed at that time. So it was just her pushing me to do better, you know, in whatever path I decided to take. So that shaped me, you know, to the person that I am now, right? Now that I am a mom of two, it's like I could think back and I could say, you know, I understand why she was the way that she was with me, is because she wanted me to be better. She wanted me to do better. And it's the same thing that I want for my kids. So that identity as a mom now is different, right? It completely changes you as well. You know, me as a wife, as a partner, we have so many different roles and so many things that we juggle with. And I think all of that changes you, and it makes you grow, and it makes you learn. And I think that's the beauty of it. You know, you make mistakes along the way, but you learn from those mistakes, and you learn from things that you might have done in the past, right? Things that you might have, you know, I recall like being upset with my grandmother about something, right? Because she was really strict. But now that I think about it, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand, you know, now I understand why she was this way, because now I have children and I'm that protective mom now. You know, I'm the one that wants them to be safe, that wants them to be, you know, guided in the right direction. So you learn from that, you know. So each stage of your life, you have people that come into your life for a reason and that are going to help you. You know, I have friends that have come into my life that helped me. You know, my best friend, you know, she's the one that guided me through college. She's the one that was on top of me saying, hey, have you applied? Have you submitted this? Have you submitted that? You know, because I was new to that. I wasn't familiar with that. I didn't have anyone in my family to guide me to that. So I had people in my life along the way that really helped me and that shaped me into what I am now. So.
Lorena, thank you for that. Similarly, there's just a little bit of a similarity. And I think here, you know, I'm trying to see how can I summarize this in the best way possible. But this is a question that I think I have to hit upon some of the roles. So I was brought up as the only girl in a Jamaican family living in Jamaica, which meant that it's very hegemonic and very male-centered, right? So the first thing that I recognized was, this shit ain't fair. That's what I remember kind of like moving through, right? My brothers being able to learn how to drive or drive the car, but me not being able to. The chores, which is that you need to wash the dishes and make up the bed, but my brother's not needing to wash the dishes. And just these other things that were happening that I actually fought against. I fought against so much that my parents were like, okay, I think we need to send you away for school, because Jamaica seems to not be right. The way that it was doesn't seem like it was going to work out right. I was always in trouble. I was always getting my parents did corporal punishment. So I was always getting beaten, right? And so there was on one end, my mother being very, very attentive to me, being the only girl, right? And taking me to the hair salon or to the dressmaker and really showering me and giving me some privileges. But then on the other hand, because it was a male dominated family, noticing that my mother would kind of go along to get along, that if she said I could do something and then my father said I couldn't do it, it was I couldn't do it. And that he always had the last word, and me saying that isn't right and always fighting against that. and seeing how that actually translated into my romantic relationships, and it didn't translate well. So in my romantic relationships, it was, you think you're the man, you think you wear the pants, because if they said A, I said B. Like I was always arguing, I was always opposing, I was always trying to gain power, because for me, that was what was lacking. That growing up, there was a limited amount of power or autonomy. And so I was always in a fight to try to gain that. And I think that is the main influence, or the main kind of pull, that when I see inequity, or I see what's called unfairness, like I don't shut up. I'm like, right, I think about how I am, or how I show up here on campus. And I think about also that in my department, I am an N of 1 as being the only Black psychologist, female at that. And that there's a lot of people who are supportive, but the culture overwhelmingly is that it's not everything that we need to say something about, except when it comes to me, right? I say something about everything I see right outside. And so it can be annoying, and it can be frustrating. And to some extent, I've also recognized that there is a middle ground on how to speak up for things, but also how to speak up in a way that is not going to alienate people necessarily, but try to get them to validate and be brought in. And that's still a journey I'm on. Let me just be clear, right? I'm a fighter. I challenge the system. I do this all the time, but I can see how that has been because of how I was brought up. And I lean into women most often that I see are like strong. And when I say strong, I mean they're decisive, they're in leadership positions, they are efficient, they're competent, they are getting shit done. And I try to join with women like that, especially. But in the same vein, I become triggered by women who are indecisive and really highly anxious. And I recognize that that is not something necessarily about them, it is about me. And so it brings me more awareness as to where that's coming from. So I would say that's how that has kind of shown up with me. Send it over to you, Dr. Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. This, again, such a good question. I think that I'll start with my parents, because why not? I think my parents, especially my dad, my dad was Confucian, but in kind of different ways as a first generation Korean immigrant, and that he was Confucian in that he really, I think, sought sort of that value of education as, again, defined by Confucian, not by Asian Americans, right? But also, he wasn't Confucian, quote unquote, in that way that I never was restricted from doing things because I was the daughter. And I have two younger brothers also, or I have two younger brothers. So I think because of that, and especially growing up in the US, I came when I was 7. So I think I saw often race and the language, not speaking English fluently, being from a different cultural and linguistic and racial background. I think I really saw those as something that really impacted my family. And again, personally, because clearly, while it impacts us institutionally, that wasn't as salient for me as a person, and that I saw the other things affecting my families. So because of that, I feel like I was really, I think, interested in issues around racial inequality, inequalities that are the oppression and discrimination that immigrants, particularly immigrants of color, people of color, experience in institutions. And I think that also made me really want to serve as a bridge. And at the time, I think the bridge was sort of the Korean American and the dominant American society. So I feel like those type of roles and the ways in which I was socialized to do that has sort of affected the ways in which I think I approach things. And I feel like I also really, really appreciate folks who get shit done, because there's just so much. I feel like every year there's always more on our plates, right? And never less on our plates. And as we grow and as we transition from roles and identities and have other responsibilities, and it's true, I feel like I've grown so much from all the different life stages. Again, there are different joys, but I don't think the workload decreases. So I think being able to, again, find allies, find friends, find networks, people who support you, who see the vision and want to participate. I think all of those things have impacted me. And that's what I kind of seek out in all the various roles and identities that I've had.
Thank you so much to everybody that shared. Your stories were just so inspiring and very emotional. You know, I feel like a lot of everything that was said. I feel like I can kind of relate to it in my own life. You know, with my own family, with own people in my life. And the next question actually touches on something very similar that was mentioned, but you know, feel free to add anything that you'd like to. But I was wondering, how have women in your life demonstrated how to set boundaries for yourself, you know, or that like in order for you to give it your all, your glass needs to be full. And I've heard this phrase before, you know, to give it your all, to be sure that you're well, you know, you have to take care of yourself. And that phrase, you know, your glass needs to be full, is like that cup of water you need to re-energize to do everything that you're doing now. And again, feel free to jump in. Anybody can start us off.
Well, I don't know if, so here's the thing. There is a saying about the strong Black woman, and that actually sometimes may be more hurtful and harmful than helpful. And so when we think about that, in order to give your all, your glass needs to be full, I'm challenged at a little bit, which is that sometimes you don't need to give your all, that you don't need to, right? That to give your all means to expend everything that is in you. And so we may want to reframe that a little bit and say that sometimes it's enough to give enough, that it doesn't, that all doesn't equal enough, right? And that you don't necessarily, or you shouldn't necessarily have to show up 3 times as much or working twice as hard, because that is setting unachievable and unrealistic or unsustainable standard that is actually more hurtful. And I think that inadvertently, my mother, so, you know, I grew up with a woman who, whenever my father, right, taking her out of context with my father, she was a lioness. And it was a little boggling to me. I was a little confused, because when you put him in the thing, you saw her become more exactly like what society has taught women to be, which is malleable, vulnerable, right? Just like, I mean, some people will even quote biblical verses, which is the man is the head of the household. And I saw all of that when you put her with him. But when he wasn't around, I mean, she had sisters, and there was one sister who was being abused, whether it's verbally or physically. I'm not sure. I was a small child. But what I remember vividly was my mother, because she loved to wear her hats, and I get my love of stilettos from her. She's 5 foot. Okay, let's just be clear. She's a 5 foot woman, but in her stilettos, she was like 5'10", even though the stilettos just made her like 5'4". But she was like a 5'10", and she would roll up on this man, okay, and in his face, saying, right, don't you dare put your hand on my sister, and giving him the what's what and the what wherefore, and me behind her, right, because she brought her children, because where else are her children gonna be, watching her just be fierce. And so I would see these aspects of my mother and just get kind of confused when it came to how she was with my father. But it is that it's her and how she was there and how she is. It is my mentor when I started at Florida International University, a woman who identifies as lesbian and very affirming, that to me was like a change maker for how I saw myself, coming from a culture who was actually very derogatory towards LGBTQ individuals. And it was how she navigated, and actually how she even worked with me, because I can be, as my nickname was, trouble. But she had a way of working and getting the best out of me that made me realize that depending on who it is, yes, there is a way that you can work with people, any person at all, who even is challenging, but your style, your managerial, or your way to be, right? Especially if you see them as positive. So when we think about how do you set boundaries for yourself, or how do you see your glass needs to be full, I see that in the way of how you even deal with others. That if you see others in a positive light, or that they are looking to actually be more affirming, then it sometimes goes a longer way than not. I also saw from those women and others that have come after, like my Black girl doctors. I work with a group of clinicians who are all highly educated Black women, psychologists, and how they are so affirming and how they validate your need for boundaries and care, right? That if stuff happens in your life and you feel like, oh, I can't let this person down, I can't let Liana down, and I can't let Brooke down because they're dependent on me, but I got a crisis here and a fire I have to out. No, it's okay. Brooke will understand. Liza will understand. Just explain to them what's going on. And so you don't have to always be shelling out at the, right? To limit yourself. And so it's that mentorship. It's that, it's when others are actually implementing the things that you need to see that helps you to actually say, I can do it too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more than that. I think it's work in progress, I feel, because sometimes it doesn't come easy for a lot of us. You know, especially growing up in a culture where, you know, you are seen as that caretaker, as a woman, you know, you're the caretaker, you're the one that takes care of everything, you're the one that takes care of everybody. And you know, it seems like you're always, there's no break for you. Sometimes it feels like that. And you're always expected to do more, right? At least growing up in my family, you know, that was always the expectation. You know, my grandmother, she worked until the day she died, you know, doing whatever she could, you know, whether she was cooking to sell food, you know, she would make tamales to, you know, bring money, you know. It was always nonstop. And that's what I saw, you know, and that's the type of culture that I grew up in. So taking a break was not an option. Putting those boundaries was really hard. I think I started realizing and learning how to do that once I became a professional working in higher education, and being around women that knew how to do that, that would say it's okay, you know, you don't have to say yes to everything. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to say no. It's okay to say, you know, I have a lot on my plate. But I think that when you grow up in an environment that's what you know, it takes time and it's difficult to make that change, but it's just taking those little steps. And that's what I've learned to do in my career. I can't say that I'm perfect, that I'm there yet, but I could definitely say that now I know how to say no. I know how to put boundaries for myself, and I know how to ask for help when I need it. which before to me, that was like, that was a sign of weakness. Like, you don't do that, right? Like, you're supposed to be strong and you're supposed to take care of things and do things right, because that's what was expected of me. At a very young age, you know, I became the caretaker. I became the provider for my grandmother. So I had to take on those responsibilities at a really young age. So I didn't know how to do that. But along the way, I met people, you know, I had mentors that were able to show me and teach me, and, you know, it becomes easier. So I think for me, it's definitely a work in progress, but I agree. I want to be where Shelly is at right now, but yeah, that's the goal. You know, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes and to, you know, ask for help and set those boundaries, because you can, it becomes overwhelming. And when everything becomes overwhelming, you can't be there for yourself, you can't be there for others, you can't be there for your family. It takes a toll on you. So it's good to, you know, find those tools that you could use for self-care, for, you know, to really focus on yourself. So that's what I would recommend. I know that coming from some of our backgrounds, that it's difficult to do, but it's definitely a healthy thing to do.
I agree. It's also a work in progress. And I think the women in my life have shown me that you need to set boundaries for yourself in a way that only perhaps you know best. That for some people, that means, yeah, getting a massage. So for some people, it means unplugging. And then for some people, it means I'm going to stay home tonight, even though my friends are going out, and so I can actually catch up on my sleep. It means, you know, taking the time off on a Saturday. So yeah, I can take my son to do something fun. So I think that you kind of have to define that for yourself. And I also agree, it's a huge work in progress. I think especially working at a university, especially if your calendar sort of runs from, you know, fall semester and spring semester, so you just pile in so much. And March and April, I think, are the times when we start going, wow, we said yes to way too many things, and now everything is happening all at once. I think that I'm trying to be better about scheduling myself in and kind of understanding what my limits are, so that I can give my best and what is available to people around me and also to myself, because then it doesn't really help anyone, especially myself, to burn out, right? And that's not good. And I think especially for students, it's really important, because your time at CSULB is finite, but we want each semester to be something that you're okay with and you're not sort of exhausted at the end, and that, you know, and then you sort of have to take all this time to recover. So part of it is, I think, and I think knowing what your limits are, but also I think for our friends and our colleagues too, also kind of knowing what their limits are and trying not to ask all the super competent people to do everything all the time, which I think kind of what happens also in our circles as well. So I think it really is like looking at yourself and looking out for others, again. But yeah, I agree. It's still, I think I'm sure almost everyone here, if not everyone, can say that this is a work in progress.
Thank you all for sharing. I totally agree. I think setting boundaries is a work in progress because of like the culture we're raised in, you know, always like hustling, you know, always like having to, you know, work hard, especially as women of color. Like we have to, you know, work harder than other people because of our intersecting identity. So I completely agree with that. But now I kind of want to go back to talking about the concept of hope and how it relates to your careers. So how did you find and hold on to hope as you started out your career?
I can start this time. I will say that as, again, a 1.5 generation Korean American, my parents and my grandmother taught me about what it means to be Korean, but a lot of it was sort of about cultural practices, speaking the language, etc. And I learned absolutely nothing about being Korean or being Asian American or about people of color or women in my K through 12 education. And I think I went to a pretty good, public school system. So I think in high school, I was reading the Korean language newspaper, and they had quoted Elaine Kim, who is a professor of Asian American Studies, particularly focusing on Asian American women's literature at Berkeley. And I had never seen Asian American Studies before. Like, I never knew that it existed. This was in high school. And so after I read it, I started looking into a little bit, and this is actually right when I was applying for college. So I started applying to, and at the time, I also didn't know. So I just applied to Asian Studies, Asian American Studies. I had no idea that Asian Study was on Asia, and actually it was really developed after World War II as a way of the US and the West trying to understand Asia in order to politically and economically and culturally control it. And Asian American Studies was along with other ethnic studies, were founded by student activists in the 1960s who said our curriculum does not reflect us and our communities and the realities of our experiences. So I didn't know those things, but obviously also from someone in an immigrant family, I think I sort of knew that there were connections as well. So I think that understanding that there are other things greater than me, that there are so many things for me to learn, and then going to college and then meeting all these mentors. And the mentors came in all different forms, right? They came as professors, they were working in different student centers. There were students who were older than me. There were students in my cohort. There were community members that I met and high school students that I met as I was working in my college classes, community service learning classes. So I think all of those folks just really taught me something and taught me to know that my life and my experiences, and also the challenges and the inequities that I saw and were really angry about, all of those things, that people were really could shed different light and different understanding of it, and that people were all again sort of playing a role in trying to combat that and trying to empower their communities and be advocates for their communities and their families. So I think all of those things gave me hope, and I think I think at every single step of the way, I've been able to find that community. And find someone who can sort of connect me to those folks. And I also, I think over the years, I've been really trying to be that person as well. So I think those are some of the things that give me hope. Should I popcorn it to Dr. Collins?
Right, they say to give space, take space, and so I'm just like, oh, let me. I'm always like a little bit. Thank you, Dr. Kim. So I'm still tying hope to this confidence as well, right? Your confidence in your ability, but also your confidence in knowing that you have a good, I think about our confidence in our ability, and then I also think about our support system. And I say this because somehow, for some reason, my parents brought up 3 children, and at least 2 of those children I know are like freaking super confident. The other one, who's the older one, I don't know, right? He's not very outgoing like me and my other brother, right? So I'm the middle child, right? So the oldest is Richard, I'm the middle, and the youngest is Christopher. And we're born like July 10th, 11th, and 12th. So there's that too. But for some reason, 2 of us are extremely outgoing or confident and use our word. And I don't know what it is that they did, but there was something that my parents did that imbued in us this thought that we are somebody, right? That what we have to say and what we can do is meaningful. And I was a Girl Guide, and I think up here they call it Girl Scouts. I was a brownie. And then I went to as a Girl Guide, and I remember, and the school that I went to was nuns, right? It was St. Franciscan nuns that were running it in the high school. So, you know, I was always in trouble. But in one of these instances, we were as a troop filing out, and I guess one of the nuns said to me, "What is going on with you? Do you think you're special?" And I didn't take that question as being anything other than maybe, you know, a concern. So I said, "Yes, of course I'm special. My mother told me I was special." And so that was my response. And to me, that was a valid and not right and not a tongue-in-cheek response, not being rude or anything. But I felt that I've always been special. And so there was something that my parents did. And if it's not your parents, then it should be your support system. Because there will be times that you feel like, what am I doing? Is it me, right? I'm not even like, you are going to feel totally a lack of confidence, a lack of like things are just happening and you don't have any control, or why does it even matter? Why should I even bother? And that's where your Clydesdales, and I say these Clydesdales because I keep thinking about the Budweiser commercial where the little dog, right, the little puppy is being harassed by wolves, and then you see a stack of Clydesdale horses behind him, and then the wolves get scared because that's your backative right there. That's your support system. Your support system is the system that will say, nah, you are it. You're it and a bag of chips. That this person wants to be with you because, right, it's all about you. They will soup you up, they will remind you, they will puff you out, and they will put you back out there. And so if it's not your parents, it's your support system, but that's what you need. And if it's not them, it's me, it's Dr. Kim, it's Lorena. So that is what I have to say. Send it over to you, Lorena.
Thank you, Dr. Shelley. I completely agree. Your support system is going to be your lifeline, especially going through college. You know, for me growing up, my hope was I wanted to go to school. I wanted to get an education, and I knew that from a young age. But I didn't know how to get there, right? So that was the tricky part, is getting there. You know, for me, it was either, you know, I applied to these universities and I get admitted, or my plan B was I had signed up for the Army. I was gonna go to the Army because that was a way to be able to get an education. You know, so that was what was in my head. You know, that those were my two outlets, and I knew that I had to take one in order for me to be able to be someone, you know, be able to provide for my family, be able to, you know, become the first person to be able to go to school and get an education and get a degree. So that was hard, you know, when you feel like you don't have a lot of options, you know, and when you feel that, you know, your support system is limited, especially for, you know, first generation college students, it does feel limited. I was born and raised in Santa Ana, you know, not the best schools. You know, we had counselors, but there were so many students for each counselor that sometimes we just didn't get that guidance that we needed to be able to get us to where we needed to be. So that's where your support system came into play. And for me, I tried to get involved in as many things as I could. I was part of the Upper Bound program, and that was my lifeline to get into college at that point. You know, I had already, you know, I had already made that decision. If I don't get in, then I'm going to go to the military. That's going to be my lifeline. And that's the path that I decided that I was going to take, so that then I would be able to get an education. And my lifeline came when I joined Upper Bound. You know, they really guided me through that process of applying, of getting to know how it was to be a college student. And if it wasn't for that, I probably would have been in the military, because, you know, the military is going to tell you what you want to hear. You know, they had already told me that I was not admitted. So I was gonna join, and that was not true. You know, I had already been admitted to Fullerton and to some other schools. So I decided to take that path, and I ended up going to Fullerton. And then when I was in Fullerton, you know, I didn't have anybody. None of my friends went to college with me. My lifeline at Fullerton was EOP, you know, and that's why I'm so grateful to programs such as Upper Bound, such as EOP, because they really give you the tools and the foundation that you need to make it, you know, to be able to graduate. And that's why I feel so, I'm like really proud of being able to give back and being proud to be an EOP counselor, because now I'm able to help students like myself get through those steps, right? I had amazing counselors that guided me through the whole process, and not everything was easy. You know, there was times where I wanted to give up. You know, there was times where I was put on academic probation, and I thought that was the end of me. You know, that was the end of my rope, and they were there to, like, you know, pull me out and say, you know what, this is okay. This happens. You know, you're gonna get through it, and they're pushing you and they're guiding you and giving you the tools that you need to be able to succeed. So take advantage of all of that. Take advantage of the people that you have available to you here at Cal State Long Beach. And we have amazing people. I mean, just in this room here, we have amazing people. So it's just using those resources. That's what my lifeline was at, you know, getting through college. And that's what my hope, it gave me hope. And then later on, you know, they pushed me. They're like, oh, apply, you know, apply, get your master's. It took me a while, but I ended up doing it, you know, and hopefully one day I'll, you know, continue and hopefully get my PhD. You know, that's the next step. It's a journey, and you never, you know, don't put limits. You know, the sky is the limit, and you just have to keep going. But hold on to those people in your life that are going to guide you and push you to do better.
I think that's such an important thing for everyone to know, that, yeah, just having that supportive network, especially through college, and, you know, especially if you don't have, you know, parents that have gone through that, you know, having a supportive network is definitely really important. I know for me, it has been really important. I don't know if what I would have done without professors that I've gotten to know, or even like older students too. So I think thank you all for sharing. I really appreciate it, especially, you know, being vulnerable too in this space. So now I want to open it up to a Q&A. So if anyone has any questions for our panelists, please share them through the chat or unmute yourself to speak.
While people are formulating their questions, Lorena, I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Kim and Lorena, for what you said, because there is something about even just the way Lorena is saying that last piece that I was like, yeah, I failed. Like, don't think that, right? I failed and thinking, okay, should I just not do this anymore? And you're so on it. Yes. Okay.
And while people are, oh, sorry.
No, Dr. Kim, please. I just want to comment, but
I just also wanted to say, while people are formulating questions, Eduardo, if you look at my CV, if you look at my my resume, it looks like I did everything right, exactly on time. Like, I went to undergrad, I went to MA, I got my MA, I got my PhD, I got a job, and that is what it says on paper. And I will tell you, every single step of the way, I was like, oh my gosh, I do not belong in this program. Everyone is smarter than me. I have the total imposter syndrome. This is so hard. I think I'm in the wrong program. I think I'm doing the wrong thing. And it's amazing how much support we get from folks to kind of help us get through those times, and also then to do other things, right? Like Lorena and Dr. Shelley. So I also want to say that too. Sometimes it seems like other people, it's working out, but we need, oh my gosh, the imposter syndrome is real. So and we really benefit from other folks around. And I think even though I wasn't part of Upward Bound, I was a part of a summer program that for racialized students to explore PhD programs, and that I think that really helped me get into graduate school. So I also really benefited from programs that served underrepresented students, and to me, that's why I think I'm also doing what I'm doing too, because I also want to give back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. I'd just like to thank you all for, sharing your experience, because it does remind me as a man, right, how I grew up, with two sisters, and looking at, my dad, may he rest in peace, how he treated me differently than my sister. So now as a father of a young little girl, 9 years old, and an 11-year-old boy, I want to make sure that they both have the same equal opportunities, right? Because I must admit, as a man, there's a lot of things we get away with, right? And my sisters didn't. So even in the workplace, for me personally, understanding the dynamics of gender and understanding how, even when I come home with my wife, the extra activities that she has to do, right? I'll go to work, I get my kids ready. In the morning, my responsibility is breakfast. Then her responsibility is, cooking, tutoring, homework. And sometimes I'm oblivious to what my kids are doing, right? So I have to reflect on everything that you all have to go through, whether you have kids or not, it is very different. Unfortunately, the way I was brought up is very different. But I also take this moment to understand that everything that you do, it's inspirational, because not only do you have a responsibility of being a woman, being a mother, being a great leader. And I always strongly believe that if you want things to get done, go to a woman who's going to lead, because they lead with heart, they lead with passion. And I have no problem saying that, because I draw inspiration from Lorena when I have conversations with her, from Annabelle when I have conversations with her, right? From Pamela Lewis, who's in the call right now, inspiration for her, right? Evelyn, Alexandra, I can go on and go on and go on. I'm like, wow, my thought process and what I do is influenced by a lot of women. So thank you for being those leaders and being in this space and to allow me to express how I feel. So I commend for everything that you said, and I appreciate you being open and very vulnerable to the space. So thank you.
When somebody walks into my office and tells me that they have imposter syndrome, this is what I say. I say, if you already knew the material, you would be the teacher and not the student. Do you believe in your capacity to learn? Because that's what it is. It's not about whether you know it or don't know it, but do you believe in your capacity to learn? I started out in community college about I'm going to be a pediatrician. And even though I'm coming from the metric system, for some reason, I couldn't seem to pass the damn exams in chemistry. That was our metric. I was just like, what happened? So I said to myself, do you really want to be a pediatrician? You don't even like blood. You like kids. That's the only thing you really like. So why not be a child psychologist? Because I sat there and I thought, I don't even want to be. And so it is not that any avenue isn't open to you. I just didn't want to have to put myself into something that I know was going to be really difficult for me. And so I was able to pivot and find something else. And you have that capacity to be flexible and to learn. Once you believe that, you belong. Once you believe that, you belong. And I just want you to remember that, okay? Because we have the capacity to learn.
And just adding to that, it's also having the capacity to, learn to push yourself to do things that you maybe would never have done before. I consider myself, I wish I was as outgoing and outspoken as Shelly, but that has never been my forte. I've always been, I told Eduardo, I'm like, I'm a behind the scenes type of person, I like doing things behind the scenes. I'm efficient at doing that. And, you know, putting myself out there is not something that comes naturally to me. But I think it's important, especially for us women. I think it's important to, we have voices, we have great ideas, you know, we have something to say. And a lot of the times you just need to step out of your comfort zone, you know. And I always try to challenge myself in every step that I can, you know, by doing that. It doesn't come easy, and I have to work at it every single time. When I was asked to do this panel, I was surprised. I was like, why? Why me? You know, and I was like questioning, like, is this something that I want to do? Like, this is not something that I would typically be comfortable with, right? But it's putting yourself out there, and, you know, knowing that you might not be the best person to speak on things, and you might not be eloquent in things that you might say, but that your voice is still powerful and it still means something. So I always encourage, like, my students, you know, get out there, you know, join a club, you know, go to a group, tell your story, you know, telling our stories, knowing our backgrounds, knowing our history. That's so important, and it makes a difference, because, you know, you'll find that you're not alone. You know, you'll find people around you that, you know, you might not share the same exact stories, but there's more things that we have, you know, that we have in common that makes us, you know, stronger, right? Stronger together. So I always tell that to my students, like, even if you're uncomfortable, you know, even if you don't know how to ask something, don't think that it's dumb, or that, you know, you're doing something wrong, you know, like, still ask it. There's no question that it's dumb. You know, put yourself out there and make mistakes. That's okay. You know, like, that's how you learn, and that's how you grow. So I always try to do that. You know, I always try to, like, do things that might not be comfortable, but I really push myself, because I believe in it, and because I know that it's gonna help not just myself, but maybe I could help someone else along the way. So that's important to me.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. You know, I relate a lot to what we were bringing up about the imposter syndrome. I am a first generation student and a undocumented student. So when I first came into CSULB, I had no idea where to go. I had no idea what to do. I remember feeling like I had to have my life figured out. You know, I had to, like, come in like, okay, like, everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody knows, you know, what they're gonna do next. I have no idea what I want to be. I have no idea where I want to go. Until I had actually went to a resource center on campus for students like me, the Dream Success Center, where I met, that was my first interaction with a staff member at CSULB. She's no longer here, works at the Dream Success Center, but her name is Jessica Rios, and she had inspired me so much as a first year student. I remember I shared, I don't even know how this came to conversation, but I shared my story with her, and she was very open with me, and she encouraged me to, you know, to be a part of programs that didn't limit me based on my status. So she introduced me to all types of resources, and now I'm a part of different opportunities on campus that have allowed me to grow in so many ways, and I'm super thankful for that. And so I think our panelists here today, because sharing your stories, you know, it makes me feel, you know, I'm not alone. You know, every single person, whether they come from different backgrounds, go through the same struggles, the same hardships in many different ways, but we have grown and we have flourished into, like, these beautiful roses. And I want to thank everybody here so much for sharing. I know there's a question in the chat that I did want to acknowledge, but I just wanted to say those words to everyone here, but thank you. So Makisha wanted to ask if y'all would mind sharing, you know, what advice do you have to women in support do you have to women in supporting each other in the classroom, in the workplace? Please provide specific examples if possible for us to know what that looks like in practice. And again, no particular order, but feel free to jump right in.
What Lorena said, listen, I met Lorena when it was 2020 EOP wanted to put on a campus-wide event, and then they wanted to make sure there was CAP support. And what drew me or connected me, and Lorena doesn't know this, was that Lorena has a way about her that I interpreted or perceived as grounding, stable, and totally like nurturing for you, that it was just positive, that even though, right, yeah, not necessarily loud, and even though I didn't know that really, Lorena, but there is and was a feeling about you that was just welcoming and warm, and just felt like, you know what, you the stable one. Like when there's drama, TNT over here, right, you can maybe sort out and bring it back and get it stabilized. And that's how I feel about you. And that's what affirming somebody looks like in the workplace and in the classroom. You give them the opportunity to speak, and then you back their shit up. Right? Because a lot of times you'll have people, you know, back channeling you and saying, "Ah, that was great, Lorena. You know what?" But they don't say it in front of other people. Or I'm glad, and you want to make sure you do that. You give people the opportunity to be on their platform, but you also back them up totally. And that's what it looks like for me.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, a couple people that I wanted to acknowledge already left. I know they're not here for me alone, but I did want to acknowledge the folks in here who actually have been part of that backbone for me at Long Beach. So Annabelle Cariaga, who is here, is that person. Art Medina, who is here, is that person. Margaret Kuo, Dr. Kuo, who is here, is that person. And other folks. I'm actually also part of the Asian Pacific Island Network, which is the Faculty Staff Association. And it's been around for a long time, but this was the first year that we've been recognized. So even though I didn't work directly with Latinx Faculty Staff Association and Black Faculty Staff Association, I know that our new presidents have benefited so much from their leadership and their willingness to share information and to help us get through some of the process, and kind of understand when things happen on this campus. We're like, oh, okay, how do we get through this? How do we get around this? How do we achieve this? So even though I actually have not worked with these two, my two colleagues, I have already benefited from them, and I just want to thank you for that as well. I don't know if you know that, but we so appreciate you. I just want to say I completely agree with Dr. Shelley. I'm also kind of like Lorena. I'm so much more comfortable being in the background. And I know that that's a stereotype of Asian American women, and I absolutely hate it. And I hate the fact that that's actually also kind of who I am. So it's really hard to change things. So what I like to do is also to acknowledge that, first of all, right? But also to make sure that, yes, who's in the room with me? Who else needs to be in the room? Who is missing from this room? How can we get people in there? How can we promote people? I think, so I'm part of the Generation X, and it's interesting now. It's really weird. I feel like I was junior faculty for so long, and then suddenly I'm now senior faculty, and there are folks who are coming up, and I want to make sure that they are promoted. I want to make sure that they're here. They do such great things already. I shout out to all the staff, especially who are working on the Anna Pizzi Project Resilience, who don't get anything. They actually get added work, but they wanted to go for this grant because they knew that it would support our students. And so they're doing it completely because of that. So all of these folks are the people that I get to come to work with and work with, right? For you all. So I think those are the things that just make me so excited. And it's true, like you have to back each other up. Front of the house and also behind the house. You need to know each other, right? You need to know each other. You need to be able to trust each other and be able to work with one another to actually really do this. And I think that's what made all the difference. I know so many women of color, Asian American women, API women who had such a hard time in academia. And I feel like not that Long Beach is perfect by any means, but the fact that I've actually had support and there is a strong presence and at least a critical mass of women of color, again, not perfect, but it really has made a difference in terms of being able to be supportive for the work that I want to do, which is, again, as you all said, being able for our students to tell their stories and learn how to tell stories, be comfortable and be able to be doing that in every aspect of your lives.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Kim. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it any better than Dr. Shelley, Dr. Kim. But yeah, for me, a big part of it is, advocacy, providing advocacy for our students, and that's something that I try to do in every area of my job, whether it is, working with the financial aid office, and making sure that our students are receiving the information that they need, or in my role in the Latinx Faculty and Staff Association, collaborating with others, bringing up initiatives that we know are important, that they are going to make a difference in the lives of our students. So I think all of that is the things that you have to do. Sometimes you have to ask the tough questions, and you have to get involved, and that makes a difference. You might not see it right away, but you will see it later on. And I think for our students, it's like Shelley said, is having your back, it's walking with you, like I always say, I might not be holding your hand all the time, but I'm going to walk next to you, and we're going to get you through to where you need to be or where you want to be, so it's always, supporting our students in any way that we possibly can. And if that means knocking on people's doors or, making calls, I think, having those connections with people on campus is so important, because I know that I feel comfortable calling someone when I need to, right? If my student needs something, I know that I know someone in that department that I could pick up the phone and I could call for you, right? Because a lot of times that makes the difference. I don't want to have to send you, being, bounced around from place to place. So to me, that's really important, and sometimes I might not have all the answers, and I might tell you, what, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to I'm going to get you that answer, and it's following through. That's really important. And I think that's the type of commitment that I like to have with my students. And that's the type of commitment that I, want to have with everything that I get involved in, because at the end of the day, we're there for you guys. We're there to make your experience that much better. So I think that's what it looks like for me.
Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like it's like such a powerful way. I love your stories, of course. They've always, I feel like stories, how we mentioned before, have a lot of meaning and a lot of power behind it, a lot of inspiration. And I got a chat sent to me privately that I wanted to ask, and it sort of relates a little bit to what most of us have briefly mentioned here and there. But this person wanted to know what inspires you as women of color. And I believe this is like in the work you're doing, what encourages you to do the work that you do, fight for what you believe in. And again, no particular order, feel free to jump right in.
I think for me, it's just life experiences, right? It's what I went through, right? I was a student. I was a struggling student, first generation, low income student, finding my way through college. And, like I said, those connections, those support groups, those programs that I was involved in, they made a difference in my life. They made a difference in my educational journey. So that's what drives me. You know, I started off my career in financial aid as a federal work study student when I started, you know, as an incoming freshman. And that's how I got involved, you know, working with students. And that's that became my passion. I knew early on that that's what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted to help students. I wanted to support students the way that I was being supported by some amazing, you know, counselors and mentors that I had when I was in school. So that's what drives my passion, is working with students that are going through the same things that I went through. And I want them to know that they're not alone, right? That, you know, I was a low income student, you know, raised by my grandmother, and, you know, immigrants she was an immigrant. And I was able to do it, you know, and if I'm able to do it, I want to be able to give that support to other students as well. So I think that's what drives my passion in working in higher education and everything that I do.
Did we all talk? Did Dr. Kim talk as well?
Go ahead.
Okay, so just so you know, I have a tendency to be multitasking a lot of times because I feel like there's not enough time in the day to do things, and usually I just want to cop out. So that being said, Fatima, what was the question?
No worries, I should have copied and pasted to the chat. So the question was, what empowers, inspires you as a woman of color? And this could be maybe in the work that you're doing to encourage you and inspire you to do or fight for what you believe in.
Okay, so don't be afraid to share your flaws, okay? Because once you share them, it takes the power away from anyone to do anything about it. That's the first thing, right? So you can say, yes, I sometimes get distracted. I sometimes am not focused, but my apologies, focus myself now. So that's one thing that I think inspires me, is that when I am around, or I can model for other people, that confidence does not equate that bad things haven't happened to you, that you haven't gotten rejected, that you don't have some challenges, right? That show up in relationships, that despite all of that, you still are allowed and should be confident in your ability to do what you want to do from your life. It's also that you get to change your mind at any given moment or time. Nothing is written in stone. And so if you decide to change your mind from one thing that you decided an hour or a day ago, do it. It is fine, as long as you have vetted the consequences and the benefits and you're okay with it. Go ahead. And so I grab inspiration from the support. I mean, just the support of people, but also from people doing great shit, right? Like I saw this Asian American man who he was in the military, and then he was now the first astronaut, Asian American astronaut, but then he had also been to Harvard. And I was like, what the fuck? So I get inspiration from him. I was like, okay, we're gonna see what we, maybe not all of that, but people doing stuff means that I get to do stuff too if I want to do stuff. Like, try not to limit yourself, because the bottom line is that there are people out there that will put limits on you, and you should not be one of them. You should absolutely not be one of them. Don't be afraid to dream, because anything is possible.
Amen to that.
I went to, when I was in college and I decided, I actually was a sociology major as well. And I think that what was really exciting about sociology was I got to study all the crazy, terrible things that were happening in the world, but from an institutional perspective, right? So that I knew that it took individuals and institutions for social change, and to kind of understand all the different complexities and all the different factors that shape our institutions and why it's so hard to change sometimes. I think that was really meaningful for me. And learning more about particular Asian American communities, but communities of color, at least in college, as a sociology and also focusing on Asian American studies, was really inspiring and empowering. I think the leaders, the mentors that I've met, who always made sure that people were supported along the way, who were both very vocal and fierce, and also did things quietly in all different ways, right? And I think that was really inspiring. I had a graduate student who is also a first generation working class, had very little support, wanted to learn and talk about Cambodian Americans, and she finished her MA. She went to a PhD program, and now she's our new assistant professor of Asian American Studies in our department. It's so exciting because all she also wants to do is study Cambodians across the world, Cambodian diaspora, and particularly how Cambodian Americans are facing up to the challenges, but also really addressing issues of healing, wellness, joy, rediscovering the nostalgia of 1960s Cambodian rock bands. So all of these things. So it's not just about the terrible things that happen in our community, but all the joys and all the wonderful things that happen, all the things that sustain us from day to day and year to year, and being able to then amplify that and share that with other folks. I think those are the things that really inspire me and empower me.
Wow, I love all of your words, and I love how you all just, sharing all of your experiences, because I know that a lot of people can relate to them. And now, we have to wrap it up, but, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for being here, and, and for everyone, contributing with their questions, reactions, and comments. So now I'll pass it on to Liana, who's gonna close us out.
Yes, as Lisa said, thank you all so much, Dr. Kim, Lorena, and Dr. Shelley. She did leave, but as a woman of color myself too, these I want to say like consejos, are just so important, and they are what is empowering to ourselves, I think. So yeah, it was just amazing, very powerful conversation, and I'm so glad to have you all. I hope I'm sharing the right screen, but we have a little feedback survey here. It is also in the chat. If y'all could help us out and just give us any feedback, that would be great. And then for those to stay connected with us, on the left, we also have a link, QR code to our link tree. But yes, stay tuned for more events that the Women's Collective will be hosting. In April, we do have a retreat coming up, so look out for a save the date post on Instagram and in our newsletter. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Liana. Thank you, Fatima, for putting this space together and inviting us. It was a pleasure being with you guys today. And we hope, you guys continue the amazing work that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making this space for all of us and for your leadership and your efforts in doing that.
Thank you so much. This wouldn't be possible without our panelists. So I want to thank y'all again for the time y'all made and the effort to come out today and commit some time for our presentations. But thank you so much again. I love this space so much. Again, it has helped me grow in so many ways, and it has also inspired me as a woman of color myself. But thank you so much again for your time.
Have a good afternoon, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.